Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Journalism and New Media Studies, SOJNMS. Certificate in Community Radio, CCR, English. Course 1. CCRBJM1 Introduction to Community Radio. Block 4 Managing a Community Radio Station. Unit 17 Resource Management. 17.0 Introduction. Sustainability, many would agree, is the biggest challenge for community radio, even in an enabling environment. The complex part of sustainability for community radio is the fact that ensuring financial sustainability does not always translate into a successful initiative. As one veteran community radio expert once commented, "When I start worrying about sustainability and stop worrying about my listeners, that's when my station gets into trouble." In any community radio initiative, it is important to balance all aspects of sustainability: social, institutional, financial, technical in the overall organizational strategy. We will refer to this as resource management and see how thinking about the listeners, understanding them, encouraging their participation and building their skills is the best way to ensure both human and financial sustainability and also achieve optimum utilization of technical resources. In the last 2 units we gave you some idea about how to build your team and handle the organizational issues. It is time now to learn some basics of resource mobilization and management, and then you are ready to take on the challenge of starting a community radio. 17.1 Objectives. In this unit you will learn to identify the resources that are within your reach and the resources that you can access with some effort. You will also learn to mobilize resource and understand the potential of the community as your most important resource. The word resource is used in many ways in the community radio context, and each kind of resource has its own importance which you must be able to distinguish, prioritize and use to the full potential to be successful as a manager of a community radio station. 17.2 What is resource? The dictionary meaning of the word resource is simply collective wealth. Resource refers to assets, capital, funds, materials, means, money, possessions, property, raw material, reserves, riches, wealth and inner strength. In the context of community radio, it is the last interpretation that is most appropriate. Let us take the definition a little further. A community radio uses its resources properly when the station is run with low operational costs, with technologies that are appropriate for the environment of the community, when minimal training can help the community to acquire the necessary skills to run the radio without external support. 17.2.1 Human resources. For a community radio, the human resource can be identified as 1. People from the community. 2. Experts, officials and social workers from outside the community. 3. Staff of the station who may or may not belong to the community. The most important body of community members in a community radio is the community volunteers who come to the station out of personal interest, curiosity and the desire to learn something new. Every community radio relies heavily on the hours and creativity offered by volunteer workers who are not on the regular payroll of the station. A station's approach to the role and contribution of volunteers has tremendous impact on organizational character and is an important factor while evaluating the station's overall performance in serving the needs of the community. When the station treats the volunteer with the same professionalism given to a paid worker, i.e., in recruiting, selecting and training the right person for the right job and in offering incentives, then the volunteer also takes the station seriously. Recognizing the volunteer's impact on the station is the first step towards developing a comprehensive volunteer management program. Volunteer management is both a strategy and a philosophy. It's a way of looking after your unpaid workers that benefits everyone. A few full-time staff is always required for supervising the large body of volunteers, to manage the technical facilities, and to coordinate with local authorities and developmental agencies. The best possible committed group of volunteers, however, are not sufficient to run a station because a volunteer, as the word immediately suggests, have only limited responsibility. Most stations require, in addition to volunteers, full-time paid staff entrusted with the responsibility of running the station smoothly. The station manager needs to develop skills to Balance the workload between volunteers and staff. Create an environment of understanding and cooperation between volunteers and staff members, and understand the areas of divided responsibility. Station managers in a community radio usually have little experience with managing employees and are generally not familiar with best practices in the field. In some ways, the very concept is anathema to our values. And yet, effective managers must evaluate, motivate, and engage staff members, deal with problem employees, make decisions about merit-based versus cost-of-living pay raises, recruit and select competent volunteers, manage staff volunteer performance, and learned how to terminate contracts without getting into trouble. Within the community. 17.2.2 Financial resources. A community station obviously will not have any consolidated fund to support it. It will have to depend upon grants and endowments from funding agencies. In case of a community radio owned by educational institutions or Krishi VM Kendras, usually the authorities provide the funds for setting up and some annual grants for running the station. Budgets vary widely, and figures on spending range from 1.5 lakh rupees to 20 lakhs in a year. It all depends upon how much money is available for spending, what the salary structure is in. Fees for volunteers and other participants, cost of maintenance of equipment and other operational expenses. It is wise to examine budgets from other stations to work out a budget for one's own station, but it is also important to understand that your budget will be unique depending on the organizations that you are part of and the communities that you serve. The first resource that needs attention is acquiring the space needed for setting up the station. In educational institutes, this space is most often available free of cost. There are usually empty rooms in corners of a building that can be converted into studio and broadcast premises. The station manager, however, must ensure that the space provided is suitable for setting up a community radio technical equipment, easily accessible to the community, has enough space for a broadcast studio, recording studio, editing console in some area for archiving and program discussion activities. For a Krishi Vigyan Kendra or an Go-owned community radio, finance may be required to acquire the setting up space. In looking for space, it is important to balance two distinct needs, price and utility. Sometimes free space is available or offered by community members. Before taking the free space that is offered, consider the work and money that will be needed to build in the offered space a good broadcast studio and station premises. Aside from the size of the rooms, the aspects that need consideration are ventilation, power supply and access. It is also important to plan for growth. Get as much space as you can and develop long-term plans for making it useful. 17.2.3 Technical resources. A study of the available range of equipments and their costs will show that a community radio station can be built and equipped for less than the cost of a single tower of a single mobile telephone network, while enabling a dimension of public communication that telephone and the internet cannot. A community radio station's technical needs should always be minimal to start. The more sophisticated the equipment, the more difficult it will be to train the volunteers and maintain the equipment with local support. This, however, does not mean that older, outdated equipment can be used. The technology should be modern, easy to handle and maintain, as well as economically affordable. The basic equipments needed are a studio with microphone and phone-in facility for listeners to broadcast and interact in live programs, an editing console to process the field recordings and make programs in different formats, a set of field recording equipments that are easy to operate and maintain, transmitter and antenna for broadcast. Once a community radio station begins operations and starts running successfully, it is possible to expand the technical base and incorporate innovations and additional technical resources. The technological developments that have had the most impact on community radio in more recent years are ICTs, especially the internet, digital audio formats and mobile telephony. These technologies have seen tremendous advances in both their accessibility and usability. A connection to the internet can be used in multiple ways by a station to provide better services to its community. Some of the successful experiments are as below. In Indonesia, an internet-based radio news and program exchange network put the concerns of poor and remote communities on the national agenda and helped to create a democratic culture after years of authoritarian rule and censorship. Kotmale Community Radio Station in Sri Lanka became a community multimedia center when it decided to build an internet cafe to share its internet connection with the community. In Ecuador and Spain, community radio stations use the internet to produce programs that keep Ecuadorian migrants in contact with their communities and exposed money transfer companies charging excessive commission to transfer remittances. Community-driven solutions are emerging in many parts of the world which are designed to extend facilities to communities bypassed by traditional telecommunication networks, and which provide ICT services that meet the specific needs of the poor and rural communities. In conjunction with community radio, these networks and service providers can offer community triple play, IACLI owned and managed operations providing radio, internet access, and voice over IP telephony. 17.3 Custodians of resource. Although there is no magic formula to ensure smooth management of resources for a community radio, three components, social, institutional, and financial, should be taken into consideration to develop and sustain participatory communication processes. Without a balance between these three factors, resource management is unlikely to be achieved, either on the immediate day-to-day functioning of the station or on the long-term plans for community radio. The first and the most important step is interacting with the community and ensuring the acceptance of the idea of setting up a community radio station. Social sustainability is the bedrock of the project. If we didn't believe this, we wouldn't be doing community radio. Jack Byrne. 17.3.1 Social sustainability. The community station needs effective outreach campaigns and services for its potential listeners in order to cultivate a committed listening audience. For example, many stations offer workshops on topics which community members can use in their work. Others launch initiatives toward skill development in specific areas, e.g. folklore or folk theatre, to develop community bondages with the radio station. International donors and civil society groups often contribute to a station's social sustainability by helping radio stations set objectives for outreach, training and social activities, and by financing such activities. However, it is crucial that external agencies do not control such outreach activities. That could threaten the authenticity and durability of the relationship being built between the station and its listeners. Very broadly, the social sustainability factors are community support. It builds a secure base that will sustain the radio station in the long run. Community participation in programs and programming. It promotes ownership, and they develop a vested interest. Community involvement can make up for lack of funding, as volunteers contribute their time and material to the station. A case study. In Bolivia, from the 1960s to the 1980s, mine workers controlled more than 20 radio stations. The impoverished mine workers contributed to the financial sustainability of the community radio stations by donating 1 day of their salary. They defended these stations with their lives when the army attacked them during military coups. The only reason was that these stations were part of the community, and the workers had appropriated the communication process, which is more complex than merely getting to run the equipment and broadcast programs. In an ideal situation, when the communication projects in a community radio are really decided at the community level with community volunteers as the driving force in the process and the community is involved in decision-making, the radio station finds sustainability through community initiatives. Without people's support, without participation, it is unrealistic to talk about sustainability, even if the funds are available. Some activities generated without community support can affect the social basis of programs. These could even be donor-led initiatives and initiatives that are vulnerable to governance censure. 17.3.2 Institutional sustainability. Institutional sustainability is the framework that facilitates the participatory communication process. On one hand, it has to do with the legal framework, with the existing laws and regulations. On the other hand, it has to do with the radio station's management procedures. as well as the human and working relationships among its staff. A community radio station that is institutionally sustainable is able to broaden the community's participation in its management. This requires a participatory decision-making process, transparency and transferring knowledge to new generations. When this is achieved, the community, and not a particular group, becomes responsible for the radio station's ventures and its ultimate success. Institutional sustainability includes the need for legislation that considers community radio as a public service and a cultural and educational platform, and legislation that differentiates and makes allowances for different tiers of radio. A clear definition of CR and international institutions can make positive contributions to institutional sustainability by advocating participatory programs and focusing on communication. Institutional sustainability is important in terms of strengthening the local organization and the internal democratic process. However, it is usually subject to numerous external conditions. 17.3.3 Financial sustainability. This includes the station's ability to pay for core staff, offer incentives to its volunteers, maintain the equipment, contribute to program development, invest in training of staff as well as community skills, and meet the other operating costs. This form of sustainability requires that stations become effective at drawing funds from donors who are external to the community and that they organize resource mobilization activities. But the most important measure of financial sustainability is a station's ability to secure contributions from their community in kind and cash, generate fees from announcements by local organizations and businesses, and develop sponsorships from community groups for special programs they request. Donors, after all, usually seek to stop providing financial support within a few years. In becoming financially sustainable, community radio stations often face several learning challenges, which include learning how to seek and apply for funding, how to market their activities, and seek contributions from local individuals and organizations. Financial sustainability has much to do with the social and institutional environment. Clearly, a proper legislation that protects community radio stations' right to communicate would facilitate acquiring funding, both from national and international sources. Likewise, if development agencies were consistent in their support to participatory processes, funds contributing to strengthening the voices of communities would get the priority. Moreover, funding doesn't necessarily have to come from international sources. Recently, the Department of Science, many of the stations suffering from acute financial shortage. However, very few communities can actually command or find enough resource to set up a community radio and pay for the expenses incurred for day-to-day running. In case of a community radio licensed to an educational organization, part of this problem is taken care of by the institute's own financial planning, but in the case of an IGNOU licensed community radio, the issue of funding can be serious. In their relationship with donors, community organizations are often torn between wanting to win the approval, and hence, money, of donors, and resentment at having to depend on outsiders who have the power to influence their very survival. Most community radios across the world try to link fundraising with community awareness programs or events in which community can play a part. Such activities not only help to expand the station's interaction with the community but also offer opportunities to the community to become involved in running of the station and address the ownership issue. A more detailed analysis of the sustainability issues will be taken up in course IT 17.4 Resource Management. The habits and lifestyles of listeners change, the populations of our communities change, and station programming must change if the station is to continue to serve listeners and be a vital community institution. A community radio station manager needs to have clear understanding of the dynamics within the community and answers to questions about the changes in the society that the station serves. Ideally, the management of a community radio should be in the hands of the community, but experiences at the grassroots level shows that workings of such stations are never easy. However, the community radio structure should offer the possibility of accountability to the audience, user. The community radio human management structure has very broadly 6 groups whose activities have to be coordinated and on whose interest and expertise the station depends. These are: A. The Program Policy Committee members who provides the station with inputs about the community's interests, needs and response to programs. Broadcast. B. The Management Committee members who decide upon the staff structure, policy for volunteer recruitment, the minimum educational level for the staff and a volunteer and also the policy for skill development and training. Every community radio needs to put in place a financial plan even before it starts operation. The planning process will include calculating the financial implications of the entire project, areas of cost escalation and where the costs will reduce with time. The plan will also look into ways and means of fundraising, advertising policy and institutional funding sources, and possible business partners. A community radio is expected to be a model non-profit organization, function collaboratively and transparently and always remain open to new ideas for development and refinement of appropriate station policies and procedures. It should have the courage to experiment with approaches to internal and external organizational communication. A case study. Veru FM 89.9 began broadcasting in May 1988 as a grassroots, non-profit, non-commercial, volunteer-powered and listener-supported community radio service, run by a volunteer board of directors drawn from the station's service area. Striving to be a voice of many voices, WERU trains members of the community to be on-air programmers and behind-the-scenes producers. It provides access to the airwaves for individuals, musicians, local and beyond, non-profit community organizations, and many others in the station's signal area. This community radio station is a place for people to share music, information, ideas and more, and thus is a vibrant resource for community building over the airwaves. The station's management and governance structure includes a small paid staff, 4 full-time and 4 part-time which supervise and maintain daily operations, and over 150 volunteers and several committees whose job it is to work with the staff and other volunteers on various aspects of the station, programming, fundraising, etc., and make recommendations to the board. Consensus is sought on all major decisions through a process of collaborative decision-making. Financial support for WERU comes from its listeners and members, over 2,500. Supporting members, including individuals, families, organizations and businesses, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and special events such as the station's annual fair, held each year during the summer season. 17.5 Challenges. For a community radio, the first challenge is always where to find finance and match the available funds with the best technical operating system so that the station is able to provide good quality broadcast. The next challenge, especially in peri-urban and rural areas, is to find radio receivers for the community members to buy, as rural marketing of radio is largely neglected by the manufacturers. The next challenge is to find trained staff or volunteers. In some cases, even finding suitable trainers who can communicate in the local dialect is a challenge. Community radio activists also feel that donor agencies do not fully recognize the benefits of community radio for development and thus fail to respond to the challenges of this sector of the media. Most of them feel sustainability is the biggest challenge that the community broadcaster faces, not only in India but across the world. It is important therefore for the community radio station to incorporate in its management structure ways and means for direct community involvement which would help to create the sense of community ownership. When volunteers are ready to work like full-time committed members in a radio station, offering to sustain the activity even without donor funding, that is an indication of successful human management and sustainability. It is, however, not possible to entirely rely on the goodwill of the volunteers, and the management structure will always need to find imaginative ways of fundraising and earnings through external support. A community radio in a developing economy will require management skills in building the community interface for the station and will require external support at least in the first few years to establish itself and become the voice of the people. 17.6 Summary. In this unit we learnt about the different kinds of management issues that have to be understand for a community radio initiative. The issues are different in the pre-setup stage and after the station has started operations. These issues are broadly categorized into 3. A. Human. B. Financial. and C. Technical. The human issues deal mostly with the organizational structure of the station, the way it handles the staff and the volunteers and the kind of cooperation it can generate from the community. Financial issues are built around the sustainability factors like fundraising, relationship with donor agencies, management of running costs and formulating a suitable advertisement policy for broadcast. The technical issues are concerned with the available skills within the community, training programs and capacity enhancement for handling the equipments. Proper planning of these issues is essential for the continuation of the project, and its sustainability lies in the station management committee's ability to make the community feel a sense of ownership regarding the station and its broadcasts. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.